Welcome to the Filmlings podcast,
a bi-weekly podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 74, Kolorowy, Kieślowski. Bam! Nailed it.
If you didn't know, we're not Polish.
No, but we're kind of throwing back.
We apologize to anybody whose language we slaughtered today.
Yeah, thrown back to the world tour when we had lots of languages that we were butchering.
Yeah. Also a little bit of French. But today was kind of planned as it was a last minute episode topic that came up for us. We weren't initially planning on doing it, but then we got the tragic, sad news that Filmstruck was going off the air, which is sad. For anybody who doesn't know, Filmstruck is our we wish they were our sponsor. Right. It was a streaming service that I don't even know who hosted it. I think it was Warner Brothers who was in charge of it.
It was originally Turner Classic Movies and Criterion Collection.
Yeah,
created
kind
their
of
own
mishmashed together. They also have the Warner Brothers catalog that was brought in eventually. It was a wonderful place for people like us, and certainly people like you who like our show, to watch and learn and see curated collections of, and all these side features for all of these wonderful, wonderful old movies, classic movies, foreign films, art house films, even modern day classics that you would otherwise have a very hard time finding.
Aside from buying.
Warner Brothers kind of decided it was too niche and canceled it.
Yeah.
But we also have better news since we've already selected the topic and done the whole show.
Right.
The Criterion Channel will be launching its own streaming service in early spring 2018, which
2019.
is 2019. I was about to say. I mean, either way, crazy fast.
Yeah.
But yes, that's going to be great and fantastic. And if you want to become a charter member right now for the new Criterion streaming service, you can go sign up. I've already done it. I don't know if Jonathan's done it, but he should.
I'm going to. We're not sponsored by them, but we are telling you to go sign up.
We act like they are.
Yeah.
And we will keep doing it. You get a small discount on your monthly subscription fee if you become a charter member.
For the extent of the time that you have the subscription.
True. And more important for me, you get a little card that says that you are a charter founding member of the Criterion Channel streaming service.
Very special.
Which is awesome. It's literally you get your own little film nerd card that you can be like, look, guys, I'm a film buff.
So every time you mess up a fact, I can say, give me your film card.
Yeah. He's going to have a whole bunch every time you got it wrong.
All right. Yeah. So today we decided to kind of go foreign and talk about a director that I've been wanting to watch for a long time, which is Krzysztof Kieślowski. And a little bit of info on him. He was born in 1941 in Warsaw, Poland. He went to the College for Theater Technicians. A relative, I think, owned it, and he wanted to be a theater director, but he had never got a bachelor's or some kind of certification that he needed for that. So he started taking the film courses, and then he left that college. And after literally doing a lot of devastating health things to dodge the draft in the 60s, he attended the Lodz Film School. Not totally sure if that's how you say that. And then after that, he started off by making documentary films, and his first non-documentary film was called Personnel in 1975. And then he just kept making work. His first really big film that's still one of the main things that he's remembered for is his Decalogue, which are not technically films. They're TV movies. They're each an hour long.
Think like HBO episodes.
Yeah, they're an hour-long series of 10 episodes, each one being based on a different one of the 10 commandments, and that kind of drive for making these very thematic series is kind of what we're going to look at again today.
Yeah, themes are a theme with this guy.
Right.
Yeah.
So after that, he made most of his well-known works like Double Life of Veronique or something like that. And a couple other films. And then he passed away in 1996. But also after Decalogue, his other famous trilogy that we're talking about today is the Three Colors Trilogy.
Right. And what are those three colors, Jonathan?
So they are the three colors of the French flag: blue, white, and red. Blue came out in 1993, and white and red came out in 1994. And each of the films is loosely based on the three revolutionary ideals of France, which are liberté, égalité, fraternité. So liberty, equality, and brotherhood, basically.
Which one does the guillotine go under?
I'll leave that to the viewers to decide. And I can actually say viewers this time because we have a video episode going on.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you want to risk seeing us in person, you can always hop over to our YouTube channel. There will be a link on the blog post
Yes.
on our website to go check it out, and you can see our setup.
It's actually, as we've said before, we have faces for podcasting.
Yeah. It is it's a new setup actually, because Jonathan has a new abode in which he abides.
As you do.
And it's got it's full of like a bunch of nerdy posters and stuff, and you can see all of it, and it's nice and it's sunlit, and it's much more roomy than the last one was. Right. So it is nice to be here, and it is nice to talk with you guys face to camera lens.
Yeah. It's nice to have a conversation face to face.
Computer screen to person sitting watching their computer screen.
So,
do you think anybody like Chromecasts us? Do you think we're up on a big screen TV right now? That's kind of
my ideal, though. You know?
Boom.
Even if you just like put us on your TV and like go like cook and something while we're talking, I'm fine with that.
I made it, Mom and Dad. I made it. They told me I'd never make the big time, but I showed them.
You sure did. So back to the films. The only film to get nominated for Oscars was Red, and it kind of feels like one of those things where, you know, this big series comes out, they're all really good, but then the last movie gets all the awards.
I think you have an analogy for that.
Well, Lord of the Rings did the same thing.
Yes.
So.
yes. Yeah.
But
though not in frame, there's a lot of Lord of the Rings in this room right now.
Yeah, that's kind of ironic that all the Lord of the Rings stuff is that way. But the film Red, the last one of the trilogy, was nominated for Best Director, Best Writing, and Best Cinematography.
All at the Oscars?
At the Oscars, yeah.
As a foreign film, getting nominated in those categories is
not even in foreign film categories. Like those are just straight up Best Director awards.
That's pretty darn good. It's a tightly packed trilogy too.
Yeah, it is.
It was all produced almost all at once and not like Lord of the Rings in the sense that it all had the same set of characters. It was the same storyline all the way through. Or was it?
It's basically an anthology. Yeah.
Everything's different. Or is it?
With a loose tie-in that we'll get to.
We'll see. Anyway, on to our actual movie discussions now with our first one, Blue. Jason, take it away for us.
Three Colors, Blue, from 1993. A woman named Julie is the only survivor of the wreck, which takes the life of her husband, a world-renowned composer, and the life of her daughter. After she recovers, but still grieving, Julie instructs her lawyer to sell her house and all of her things and then moves to another city in an attempt to start a new life completely free from any connection to her past. But it's not as easy as she had hoped. Through the film, Julie befriends a prostitute living downstairs, tries to avoid a romantically attached old co-worker, discovers secrets about her late husband, and ultimately finds healing in music and connection to those around her.
All right, thank you, Jason. Now, that's the plot of the film, but let's talk about the connection to the theme, because theme is the theme for the day. That's what we're talking about. But it is a big part of filmmaking, and in some movies, it plays a huge role. In some movies, not so much. You know,
some movies, the entertainment value kind of overshadows it.
Yeah. True. And even some movies that are just interested in telling a really good story might have a really solid theme, but that might not be the big takeaway. These movies are definitely think pieces about the theme. Oh, yeah. The goal is to have you coming out of the theater going, I wonder what I think about liberté, égalité, and fraternité.
Right. Or even if not, there's a lot of other things to think about, even if you don't realize that's kind of the underlying, because the liberté, égalité, fraternité is very subtle in all three of these movies, and you really have to dig into it to even get to those themes.
And of course, in this film, you know, the liberty that we're talking about is, you know, the film starts off with a woman's life literally being wrecked.
Yeah.
And when she wakes up, she finds herself still tied to that old life. that old life has very much, the old life is both gone and not gone in the sense that it has dominated her existence. She's connected to it, and it seems like she can't move past it.
Yeah.
So over the course of the movie, she slowly earns her freedom back from that old life, which freedom, liberty, I think we can use those interchangeably, especially as Americans.
Freedom.
Red, white, and blue are also the colors on our flags, and they have a very close. The ties between the French Revolution and the American Revolution are very close. Mm-hmm. The colors are very similar for very clear, connected reasons. I'm sure some history nerd is going to tell me that's slightly different, but that's okay. Please tell me. I'd love to know. And this isn't an entirely encompassing movie. With anything as complex and as far-reaching and as applicable in different circumstances as just the idea of freedom is, no one movie could tackle all of it. But this one movie does try to explore this theme of liberty through this woman trying to regain her life and what becomes like a pretty heart-wrenching thing, and she almost kind of like moves through like the 8 stages of grief over the course of the movie until by the end, like she's become so accepting of her old life being gone that she can move past it, and her reactions to things are not what they would seem, or not what you would expect it to be in that situation. And ultimately, because she's accepted and moved on, her reactions become far more healthy than they otherwise would have been. When she meets the woman who is carrying her late husband's illegitimate child, that's a lot of information right there. I hope you watched the movie. She's far more accepting than she otherwise would have been. Had she been more tied to the past, she probably would have reacted more negatively, and her life probably would have been worse for it. It would have been a lot more struggle, a lot more hardship, a lot more fight, a lot more negativity in her life. But because she had accepted and freed herself from the past, she was able to deal with it healthily and just not let it ruin her life. And in the end, like that ended up being very nice for the poor woman who just had this child illegitimately and had not to say there was no fault there. Definitely like she dug her own grave on that one. But
at that point, she needed someone.
Like everything had gone so far to crap that, they ended up finding a way to help each other, which was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's kind of an irony in that. And a lot of people kind of look at Kieślowski's work and they realize that he'll tell you that he's dealing with this theme. He's dealing with this theme of freedom. But you come to realize that he's not necessarily just straightforwardly talk about it. Sometimes it's got a kind of an ironic twist. And I think that is the ironic twist, that she tries to escape her past, but it's only when she can go back and accept it that she really finds a freer life and a freer, it's almost a more emotional freedom than physical freedom. She tries to get physical freedom by running away. But once she starts to accept all these people that have either just have bad memories or have literally wronged her or that she has wronged, then she can start to move forward. And one of the ways, so this movie is so deeply intimate and emotional. And I love the way that Kieślowski uses his filmmaking in this one. This one is the most nonverbal of the 3 films.
There's a lot of sad looks
And sad filmmaking. I feel like there are times when she's sitting in a cafe and she's listening to the flute player playing the music that her husband composed, maybe not even realizing that he is. And you just see like her coffee cup and this time lapse of the sun or whatever. And it's almost like if you're reading a book and they have one of these really flowery emotional passages about how the sun seemed to sink and time slipped away and all that kind of stuff. It's like reading one of those passages, but seeing it and not actually like hearing it. So it's like this really beautiful visual. What's the word that we always use for this podcast?
Tableau?
No, literary. Why am I blanking? rhetoric. It's like this very beautiful
film rhetoric.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That thing we like to talk about. Film rhetoric.
Film rhetoric.
Yeah.
That's my nerdy phrase that I forgot already.
Word of the day. Film rhetoric. And Jonathan's going to put it right here in text.
Yeah. Don't underestimate me.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. It's almost, his films are films that you feel. They're very slice of life. There is,
but some of them are more direct. This one is
this is true.
I think the most, like I said, nonverbal. It's very much presented through the visuals and the sound
through like a series of images and like putting yourself into a position where you just feel feel a situation.
Like the shot of her holding the sugar cube and just letting the coffee soak up.
That was a beautiful shot, by the way.
That is just like a perfect visual representation of just darkness and depression and stuff just seeping
through capillary action. Science term for the day, capillary action.
Oh my gosh, we need to not be in the same room together because the nerdiness just like exponentially.
That's what the people are here for. Nobody keeps listening to this podcast and is like, man, I wish those guys are less nerdy.
That's true.
No, they like, yeah, give us more science terms. No, but this is a very, I would say these films fall into the category of slice of life.
Yeah.
You know, there's stuff that happens. The characters have goals that they try to pursue, but very much what we see over the course of the film, and definitely within the sense that the time the time frame of each film is so large, and especially in Blue, like I feel like it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
That we're just kind of seeing events happen in a person's life that even they probably don't recognize as connected, but do build up to an emotional moment that suddenly releases them. It's very similar to, this is going to get weird. So are you familiar with lo-fi hip hop, Jonathan?
Not terribly.
Have you ever listened to lo-fi hip hop?
I don't know. I may not identify it as such. Lo-fi,
there's lo-fi hip hop on, there's this thing now, lo-fi hip hop on YouTube, where we are, where you go listen to these 24/7 streaming live lo-fi hip hop music channels, and they play like sad coffee house music, you know, with some low driving energy in it, so it's very atmospheric. But they also show like this looping graphic of somebody, like, I don't know, studying or sitting in a cafe or something, and you just get to imagine all this stuff about the person. And it's very slice of life in that aspect, and it's very emotional because you get to imagine yourself in that situation with the music and the feeling, and why would you be sitting in that coffee shop doing the thing. And in here we have a similar thing, but one, stepped up because we have a world-class filmmaker involved.
Yeah.
And two, connected, you know, thematically and story-wise to all these other scenes that feel very similar. And, you know, occasionally there's a scene in this movie with a lot of energy, like where she chases down the car, but not terribly much. You know, even the scenes with a big surprise or a big turn are fairly subdued, both in terms of pacing, in terms of acting, in terms of noise, and in terms of color.
Yeah.
Because this film is drenched in blue.
Right. And
so
as all these
obviously,
films are.
Obviously.
Yeah, if you haven't seen any of the frames from these movies, each film is shot actually by 3 different cinematographers, I think, because he wanted them to all look different.
That makes sense.
But the art direction for all of them is heavily geared towards the color, the titular color. So this film has so much blue. One of my favorite shots is she's sitting. We don't actually know where she's sitting at first, but there's this blue lens flare that's just engulfing the entire frame. It's just drowning out all the other colors, and you can just see her face kind of just emerging through it. And then we just kind of like watch her with this lens flare for like a good minute or two. And then we pull out and we realize she's like sitting on a patio somewhere, and there's this wall with blue glass that the sun is streaming through. And when you pull out, it's, you know, obviously much less dramatic. Like there's hardly any blue. You just kind of see that it is blue. But using the camera to such drastic effect to kind of hyperbolize the lighting and the filmmaking brings it to a very internal place. And the same thing with the lamp or the the chandelier thing that she carries around with her with all the blue jewels on it.
Literally a symbol of her past.
Right. Yeah. She carries this one item from her past everywhere.
Weirdly enough, a chandelier. It's really pretty. But
Yeah.
also, like, I don't know if I were to carry a symbol from my past around, it would be a chandelier.
It's not the easiest.
It's a
thing to
little
carry.
awkward, but it also, like, I do like how it functions. It's pretty. You have a chance to shine, light through the blue crystals on it. It's nice for the actors to interact with, and just in terms of where it is physically as a household item, it is always hanging over her.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's always above her head. It's always there, ever present, just over her. And I feel like there's a lot of shots of just the chandelier.
Yeah. Or her through the chandelier, or the chandelier reflecting light back onto her face, et cetera, et cetera. So the other thing we got to talk about with this movie is the music, Alex.
The music?
Because not only is the music on its own wonderful, but its connection to the story is also great. So the score for the film was done by, and I'm going to butcher this again, Zbigniew Priesner. That's how I'm gonna stick with that for now. But he did the score for all three of these movies. But in this film, since we have a primary character, albeit a dead one, who was a composer, we have this composition running through the entire film that's supposed to be like the most beautiful, one of the world's greatest scores. It's got to be finished, or else, all the world's nations are going to go into World War III or something. That's basically the stakes that they build up in the film. But it's gorgeous. And it's used so interestingly, like in the middle of a scene. Often we will be on our main character's face, Julie, and we'll fade out. We'll have this like huge score with choral voices and everything come in, and then we'll fade back into her as she like just kind of is basically every time that happens, she's just getting sucked back and being taken into a flashback. And the way that she reacts to that is always very interesting, because sometimes she's very against it, and sometimes she just kind of lets herself be taken up by it. And especially as we get to the climax where her and Oliver have to complete the score, and then the score becomes more and more complete throughout the film.
Yeah. And even just the whole idea of the character of Oliver is interesting, right? Because he is a character from her past.
Mm-hmm. And he's actively tracking her down.
Who becomes a part of her future,
right?
But in a different way. Like the letting go of is letting for, in terms of, considering the whole movie as her finding ways to let go of her old life and move into her new life. Not that they're two separate entities, but that she has to move forward with a free mindset. And it's almost like freedom is a mindset in this movie, in order to survive and actually live and not just be a sad blue person for the rest of her life. She has to readjust how she thinks about old things and thinks about new things, be able to accept the old things and move on with the new things. And, for Oliver, it's accepting that, yes, he was my husband's coworker and colleague and friend, but also now he can be my lover moving forward.
But yeah, the way that's done is also
changes
ironic in the way that she kind of takes advantage of him in order to, at the very beginning, she takes advantage of him in order to kind of get past her own emotional stress. And then
the beginning is full of a lot of messy emotional,
lashing out. Yeah.
A lot of messy emotional strategies to deal with messy emotions that are not effective. Yeah. It's
very unhealthy.
She almost goes through like a trial and error process over the course of the whole film of like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And she tries all the bad ones, and then she moves on to the healthy stuff at the very, very end. Yeah. And she's like, oh, okay, she can be with Oliver. It's A-okay. And she starts to find, I don't know if at the very end of the movie we could define her as happy. I might say she's on the verge of happiness. It's almost like she's accepted happiness as a possibility.
Yeah, she has that potential now. I guess along those lines, the last thing we should talk about is In Roger Ebert's review of all three of these movies, he has these interesting phrases that he uses for each of them. He considers blue to be an anti-tragedy, white an anti-comedy, and red is an anti-romance. So I just kind of want to toss that out there and see what we can brainstorm about, where this idea of anti-tragedy comes from. And I think one of them is that it basically starts with it. Okay, so if we take a tragedy we've talked about on the podcast before, like Mean Streets. Mean Streets ends with the car crash. So if we were taking Julie's life and creating a tragedy, we would have her maybe find the mistress before her husband dies, and then she lashes out at Oliver because of that, and then everything kind of culminates, and then there's a car crash and her husband and daughter die. Something along those lines would be kind of the American New Wave way to go about it. But in this film, you're almost going backwards from that. You're starting with the tragic event, and then you're finding a way to move forward, and you're ending with a new life from there.
Yeah. It's like a tragedy happening in reverse order.
Yeah.
And it has all the hallmarks of a tragedy in, the terms of the emotion, the way it's shot, the acting, some of the plot points, but it ends up being just the opposite of that, which is surprising.
And it's almost like Julie has an anti-tragic flaw, which is she's so compassionate towards people that no matter how dark something becomes, like the finding her husband's mistress, she doesn't lash out. She gives her their old home, this huge mansion to raise her child in. And same thing with the prostitute in the apartment. She is the only one in the apartment that is not willing to kick her out and stuff like that. So that character trait of hers is basically the only thing that keeps her from taking all of these other really dark elements that she comes in contact with and what would traditionally turn it into a tragedy.
Yeah, and it's not saying that's not a tragedy. Right. Going back to another term that we've talked about ad nauseum, anti-hero. An anti-hero is still a hero. It's just a hero who with a lot of traits
in an unconditional sense
of that you don't traditionally consider as a hero, right? This is still a tragedy, right? Her life has still been irrevocably changed. Her husband's died, her child's died. That's a massive impact. And there's a lot of, that's maybe not the main emotional point that we deal with in the movie, but there's a lot of imagery for it. Like when she's in the pool and as she leaves, a bunch of little girls in pink swimsuits run in and jump in the pool, which is a beautiful color contrast, by the way.
Those pool shots, though, I don't know if it was that same scene, but in one of the scenes when she jumps in the pool and it's just completely black behind her, so all you see is the blue of the pool and her jumping in. Not totally sure how they did that, but yeah, there's a lot of that imagery in the pool stuff.
I don't know, man. Maybe you just gotta be Polish. But yeah, it's got a lot of tragic hallmarks, but also it's a weird twist on tragedy, in that considering you can move past tragedy and heal afterwards, right? And in that sense, it is an anti-tragedy.
Yeah.
But
it's as opposed to the tragic event being the thing that tips everything downhill. The tragic event actually, it does go downhill for a time, but it ends on an uphill. Of how, life is a series of up and downs. This is the down. This is where you typically end in a tragedy. But stuff still comes after that you have to deal with. And it's tragic, but you can heal and move on. Yeah.
All right. Shall we talk about White?
Absolutely. Set us up, Jason.
Three Colors, White, from 1994. In the second film of the trilogy, Polish immigrant to France, Karol finds himself in a civil court for divorce by his wife on the grounds that their marriage was never consummated. Karol is left penniless with only his large suitcase, in which he stows himself in order to sneak back into Poland with the help of a stranger named Mikolaj, whom he meets while sleeping in his suitcase in the subway. He begins work as a guard for a business mogul and uses information gained on this job to apprehend transactions the mogul is trying to make and raises the price 10 times what it was. Now rich, he and Mikolaj go into business together, selling various goods. All the while, Karol is creating a plan to bring his wife back into his life.
Okay, White is a very interesting addition to this whole set, because I feel like And tell me if you feel differently, but I feel like it's the least philosophical and the least emotionally complex. It almost plays as like a straight revenge tale, just done very stylistically, and it does have very nice emotional moments. I just feel like it doesn't get quite as deep as the other two. So we'll start with talking about how it relates to egalite or equality. So basically, I feel like it's tracing this idea of equality in the fact that Carol starts off being humiliated by his wife, down in the dumps emotionally, and also financially. And I feel like the whole journey is for him to literally get equal with his ex-wife by humiliating her and basically destroying her life. Which is really dark. Ironically, for the film called White, I feel like it's the darkest story of the three. So yeah, it's really interesting, especially coming straight out of Blue. You're expecting something very deep and emotional, and then you get Carol. By the time you get to the end, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so messed up. That's such a mean thing to do.
Yeah, and it's weird because Carol is not the character who you'd expect at the top of the movie to succeed at anything.
Right.
Least of all a revenge tale. He's not a character for whom I have a lot of sympathy in the movie.
Oh yeah.
You know, absolutely. He does like he gets humiliated at the start, but he also does like a bunch of weird stuff at the start that I don't know, just
like he just kind of goes in this pity party hole, like living in his suitcase.
Yeah, he's so self-pitying that it's hard to have any pity for him yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he's a sad character, but he's not a entirely sympathetic character. Yeah. And he's almost like oddly clownish in a way, in a sense. Like you could easily feel like in another movie, maybe this could be a funny story, but it's not. He's kind of like an anti-clown of sorts. Yeah. Like he's just kind of pathetic at the start. And then towards the end, he just feels mean by trying to get even. And of course, I don't know, we may have mentioned it already on camera, but you know, Carol, it's equal.
Yeah, name. Carol, his name in itself is equal.
It's an equal name, but also it's a silly name. It is. So that kind of adds to the sense of like, this is just a ridiculous human being and what is up with him.
And in that sense, I kind of wanted to jump to the point of this being an anti-comedy, because there are a lot of really ridiculous things that happen in this movie, from the beginning of him shipping himself in a trunk from France to Poland, getting himself kidnapped by thieves trying to steal tourist luggage, and then getting beat up by them when they realize that he has nothing to steal. Like that's all like comic situations that could be like straight out of a Hangover movie, basically.
Yeah, right. But it's shot entirely differently. Yeah, it's directed entirely differently. And maybe this is a good week to talk about the power of the director to steer the emotion of a scene or a film, right? Because if you had this script on paper and you gave it to a traditional comedy director, or I don't know who directed the Hangover movie, but if you gave it to that guy, the Hangover movies, I should say, 3 of them, probably directed by different people. But if you give it to a comedy director, they could easily look at the script and come out with something very different than what,
or even like a comic drama, like, what was that movie recently? With Brad Pitt and Christian Bale and
American Hustle.
Yeah. Like one of these where it's like, you know, it's got
it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
I mean, it was in this decade, probably.
I just don't watch a lot of those movies, so it's the first one that comes to my brain. But
we used to spend all of our time on Filmstruck until Filmstruck died. It's an anti-tragedy because it's coming back.
Right.
Filmstruck had to let go of its old self.
Yeah.
And become its new self.
That's true.
This is its blue. I'm scared to see what's going to do to Warner Brothers in its white phase.
Yeah. But it's okay. It'll all come together in red. Yeah, but I mean, you think of American Hustle or The Big Short or one of these like movies where someone is trying to get ahead in like this really business technical sense while also being comedic. That's kind of what this is. You know, Carol is this pathetic character. He has a little bit of wiles to him, which you don't really suspect at the beginning. He eventually like kind of pulls some over on some business moguls and gets up there. And you could see that being played in this really like cheeky, fast-paced kind of thing. But Kieślowski plays it very dramatic. Like the other director I was thinking a lot during this week is Tarkovsky, because it's that very kind of slow, atmospheric, emotional sense. And that's really interesting, like you said, taking a film that on paper could have been had a very different tone to it.
Yeah, right. And it's a series of choices between the directors and actors and of course, very importantly, in this instance, because everything is white.
Yeah.
Lots of snow, lots of light colored clothes, a lot of white people. Well, that's all these movies.
Kieślowski brings the film back to his home country.
Yeah,
of Poland.
this is the only one that goes back to Poland. A lot of freezing cold vibes and how white it is and how light it is. A lot of really bright highlights, which is ironic considering the dark happenings in the movie. It's a weird bundle of contradictions that make you feel it. And the character in it moves in an entirely opposite direction to how the character in Blue moves in terms of like just making healthy choices as a human being in your life. One makes very healthy choices by the end of the movie, and the other is just, I mean, he makes out okay by the end in a sense, but also like he's become a monster by the end of the movie. Or maybe he was the entire time. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if what he did, I mean, and what he did by the end wasn't necessarily becoming equal, right? Because somebody put him down and then he put them down. But at the end, the balance is still off, right? It's not like, we put each other down. But in his mind, it's even. Equal. Yeah. So it's very strange.
Again, an ironic twist on the whole idea. Because the other thing is, you know, white in a really kind of cliche traditional sense is purity. And that's kind of what we lose throughout the entire film is Carol's sense of doing the right thing and all that, and he just kind of goes down. I mean, there are a couple times, I think the most like shining moment for Carol is when Michael I think I said that wrong, but is when his friend asks him to kill him, and Carol brings a gun and shoots him with a blank. Spoilers, sorry.
I don't know. That's like in the middle of the movie.
But Carol uses the blank, and then he's like, "Are you really sure now?" And that's a really striking scene. And basically, Carol's like greatest selfless moment in the whole movie, because pretty much after that, he asks him to go into business with him, and then all he's thinking about in his business is getting back at his wife the entire time.
And you know what? His wife is very much his blind spot in a sense. Like, he doesn't think normally, clearly, when it comes to anything dealing with her, anything around her. When he sees her, when he's around her, he just stops functioning as a normal human being.
Yeah.
So maybe outside of that, maybe once he can put this behind him, he becomes okay. But we don't see that in this movie.
The last shot,
we have no idea.
I have a lot of conflicting feelings about the last shot.
Remind me, what's the last shot?
So at the very end, and now this is a little bit of spoilers, but you can go back and watch it whenever Criterion launches their service.
Become a charter member.
He is using binoculars to watch his wife from her prison cell that he framed her for.
Oh yeah, he's still watching her at the end now.
And he's like crying and smiling, and she is seeing him there in the courtyard with just zero expression on her face. And it's like, I don't know if that means that because there is this twisted sense throughout the film that he still loves her, right? Mm-hmm. But that emotion on his face at the end is so hard for me to reconcile with everything else that he did.
Maybe that's him finally I hope it's him finally moving on.
Yeah. And he's like, after you get out, things will be But like, it's so messed up.
Anyway, and technically speaking, like he's dead at the end, but he's not really dead, right? Like he doesn't exist within society.
Yeah,
he doesn't exist
true. On paper.
Legally, he
dead.
does not exist. Yeah. So it's very strange. And it makes. I have questions about the end of Red because of that. Like,
that's true. That's true. But we'll get there whenever we talk about Red.
Anyway.
So I guess, shall we talk about Red?
Yes, let's talk about Red. Jason, take it away for us.
Three Colors, Red, from 1994. The final film of the trilogy revolves around Valentine, a young model, and her relationship to a retired judge named Joseph Kern after she accidentally hits his dog with a car. After taking his dog to the vet and restoring it to health, it runs back to the judge's house where Valentine finds that he spends most of his time using a frequency scanner to eavesdrop on the phone calls of his neighbors. As they have many discussions over the morality of this, they end up becoming friends and bring new perspectives to each other's lives. Meanwhile, the lives of the neighbors around them echo many of the discoveries we find about the main characters, and this theme of connectivity is brought full circle in a fateful ending in which the lives of the characters from all three films are thrown unknowingly together.
Jonathan, this is an important point.
Yes, Alex?
Did you know she was Swiss?
No?
Yeah.
Like her character or the actress?
The character.
Oh, well,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, they at the very end of the movie when they're listing people, they're like Switzerland National Valentine, and the other person who we won't say right now, but we will get to because it's an interesting important plot twist. That surprised me.
Alex got surprised.
That hasn't happened in a while.
Mr. No Spoilers finally got his taste of spoilers. Or no, Mr. Give me all the spoilers.
Yeah. And it's not even that I don't get surprised because people tell me what happens. It's because I've watched so many movies.
At some point,
I'm at like 540 for the year or something like that.
Oh my gosh, you're insane.
Because I'm a nuts person, but like the past month hasn't been so good because I've been sick.
So you're down to like double normal people, as opposed to quadruple.
Yeah,
normal
still more than your average American probably, but probably not quite as much as your average film buff for the past few weeks. But I'll get back to it, I swear. Anyway, both of them are Swiss in this one. Which
the judge too?
Which judge?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't realize that.
One of them, yes, the other one, no.
Okay.
But that's interesting. And that just kind of real quick, I like that this has like a pan-European feel to it, right? You've got, and at the very end, like they're going to England to do stuff, right?
That's true.
So it centers around these French ideas, but also the entirety of Europe, or most of the entirety of Europe, especially by 1994. Berlin Wall fell before that. I
do not remember the date on that.
I don't know. I was a baby.
Literally born that year.
Anyway, especially by today, 5 years ago, gosh, the world is weird. By 5 years ago, so, in thought at least, the entirety of Europe had embraced this idea of democracy, and a lot of the democratic ideals that we embrace today trace their roots to either the American Revolution, the French Revolution, or both. And the one with the motto is the French Revolution with these three. So I like that it doesn't just limit itself to like, these are the ideas the French have, and just the French, escargot. It spreads it out to all of these people in the world who have who have embraced these thoughts and ideas and supposedly at least live by them. And we try to explore what those ideas mean in everyday life. And I think the idea of how brotherhood, or the idea that we're all in this together, we should treat each other fairly, or whatever you think the idea of brotherhood should mean, it's not a well-defined idea.
Right.
That we should love one another. All sorts of thoughts that it could mean, but doesn't necessarily mean to other people. How it wraps up together in this pan-European sense. And in theory, there's other democratic nations in the world who wants to put an American in their movie.
Right. And the other idea, I mean, like the second theme of this movie is connectivity, right? That is pretty blatant. From one of the opening shots where we're following a telephone line like under the ocean and like everywhere.
Right. It's one of the most like VF. I think it might be the only VFX shot. Is it even a VFX shot?
I don't think so. I think it was literally like a hyperlapse on a dolly track kind of deal.
Yeah,
which sounds like a lot of work, but it didn't look VFX to me, especially
they didn't have
94.
computers to do everything.
Especially in 94.
You want to shoot a shot through a cable? You had to take a camera and stick it through a cable.
You want a 30-foot poster? You got to print that crap.
I mean, it's a good poster.
It is a good poster.
It's a very good poster.
Yeah, and this one, the theme is also, the theme of brotherhood is also much more apparent on its face. Also in its ironical sense, because you have the older judge spying on all of his neighbors and kind of putting himself in their lives. He almost, not directly, but he has this very subtle I don't even want to say God complex, because I think it's more of a narrative God parallel to the way that he starts off as a judge judging people's fates and then just becomes this overseer of people's lives where he just listens in but doesn't have any direct influence on them.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Not to say that there's like a whole lot of commentary, like direct
From that
commentary
point,
there,
yeah.
But it's just a
It's
really
just kind of how it's set
interesting
up.
character structure,
Yeah.
especially given the themes that Kieślowski is drawn to.
Yeah. In terms of the themes in this movie, especially, like the titular theme, it's interesting. He's trying to reach out to those around him in a weird way.
But
It's almost like
he's
he
been
doesn't.
burned, so he's
Yeah, it's almost like he doesn't know how to do it anymore. Like he's nervous. He doesn't want to interact with other human beings anymore. He's completely isolated himself from his fellow man, from his brothers, in a sense. Maybe the whole story is a cautionary tale against doing just that. That you have to keep interacting with your fellow human beings and your fellow brothers. And even when you get burned, you have to keep doing it, because otherwise you can't function. Humans aren't meant to function as solo beings.
And it's almost prescient in that way, in the fact that nowadays it's so easy to spy on other people because they put their lives online. They put their lives in the public for you. Yeah. And it's so easy just to, live vicariously through them and shut yourself off from them physically. So not actually where I was planning to go with that, but this really interesting parallel.
Like, let's be honest, humans are hard to be around sometimes. Yeah. So like right, because everybody's been hurt by another person. That happens. Mm-hmm. That's life. That's what happens. So the motivations that caused this judge to lock himself up away from the world are completely sympathetic in a way. Yeah. It's just that he's taken it to such an extent that we go, oh, that guy's crazy.
Oh, he's one of the most likable characters in the whole trilogy.
He's also likable, but we're also like, oh, he's crazy.
Yeah.
So those two
at least at the beginning
thoughts play around the movie. Yeah, he gets weirder over time.
Yeah, I feel like he got more sympathetic over time, because that's kind of the whole character arc. Is
he does both? He just intensifies over the course of the movie.
She walks in on him, and he's just like this old curmudgeon, like, get off my lawn, take my dog, I don't care if he dies, whatever.
Right. I do love the dog setup in the movie, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, again, I was feeling for you at the beginning.
Even like the dog parallels, like. Yeah, both judges have a dog in the movie, and the dog
giving puppies,
the dog having puppies, all sorts of stuff. And I love that the dog lived. I was so happy.
I was feeling for you at the beginning, because like one of the first things that happens is she hits the dog with her car. And I was like, oh shoot, Alex, I'm sorry.
I was like, oh no. And then she was like, oh, I'll take you to the hospital. I was like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah, so it's a device. You're right. It's a multifaceted device. Like I think we talked about last time. Like the more things you can use, even if it's serving a purpose, the more like layers you can put on that, then the sneakier you can be, because the dog is not only just a device to bring them together, but he's also a metaphor for his internal hurt, and the ways that he reaches out to other people as puppies, and she's going to take some of the puppies. Okay, so I want to talk about this in terms of, we have Blue being very emotion driven. Like I said, fairly nonverbal. A lot of that is conveyed through the visuals. I feel like White is very plot driven, because it's a revenge tale. So you're kind of going from starting here and then the way that we get to here. And that twist at the end is kind of the driving force.
The thought revenge tale means plot driven.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you can't, at that point you signed up.
Yeah. And Red, though, is the most philosophical of the three, and it's the most dialogue driven. So the conversations between the old judge and Valentine are the driving force that connects all the other scenes together. In ways that we don't even realize when we start. We think they're just kind of like having this philosophical banter. Is it okay to be recording? Is it not? He's a judge. He should know better. All that stuff. And then just gets deeper and deeper and deeper as we go through and we realize the parallels between the judge and the young judge and Valentine and her off-screen lover that we never see.
Right. We just get a bunch of like weird phone calls for her.
Right.
Yeah. She's clearly in the process of being burned in some way. Yeah. And plus, like, her brother's a drug addict.
Right.
So her life is a mess as well. And she's trying, she's clearly hustling her butt off, as you can tell through all the modeling. And just the fact that I love that after every single time she goes to dance class, she is just exhausted.
Yeah.
She's like
she's the most,
one of the most sympathetic moments of the film was where she chugged an entire water bottle. Because I've 100%, I do that on like a every other day basis. Like, oh gosh, I've done too much.
Give me a sec.
Yeah.
So even though she has a lot of struggles like going on around her and a lot of internal struggles, she's not like a morally compromised character. She's one of the healthiest characters start to finish. And it's kind of the way that she perceives the world that changes rather than how she reacts to it necessarily.
She's learning more about the world. I mean, all of the characters in these movies, in theory at least, learn more about the world around them and learn how to deal with the world better from a certain aspect. And in theory, you know, our director is hoping that all of us who watch it also learn the same things over the course of the movie. Right. But, you know, in a way, you know, she's learned all of this over the course of the movie. And the person she meets at the end of the movie, she spent the whole movie becoming the perfect human being to enter this other guy's life. Yeah. And to be like, no, don't become a crazy old person. Don't become a recluse. I know about these things.
Yeah. So I guess if we're going there, let's just kind of throw down our spoiler warning and talk about the end, because the ending is basically what, you know, obviously what everything is leading up to. And it's really important. So at the end, the judge has talked a lot about how he was dumped by his girlfriend. He found she was cheating on him and got really bitter about that. And then there are some like very direct parallels. Like he tells a story of how he dropped his law book one time and it opened to the exact page of the question that he had to answer on a test. And we've been following this young law student and his girlfriend that live next to the judge that he's spying on with his radio. And at the very beginning, after she hits the dog with the car, he drops a book and looks at a page. And then we hear a line of dialogue from his girlfriend later on where she's like, was that question on the test the one that you opened your book to? And then we see him find his girlfriend in bed with another guy. And so we're building up all these parallels. And then the point when the judge says, maybe I just needed you in my life or someone like you, to Valentine. And then Valentine and the young judge get on the same ferry together. And we're like, okay, I see what's going on.
We see what's happening here.
And there's almost this supernatural thing that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's this running thing that the judge is calling this phone weather service to find out the weather anywhere in the world whenever he wants. He checks on the weather in the English Channel, which is where Valentine is going. And the girl says, oh, it's going to be sunny. It's perfectly great. I'm so excited. I'm actually going on the English Channel this week, too, and shutting down my business. And then it storms and the ferry crashes and 7 people survive. The same number of puppies that the dog had.
It's a prophetic prophecy puppies.
I know. So we have
at the Filmlings merch store. Get your own prophecy puppy.
So Valentine and the young judge survive. Carol survives. And Oliver and Julie from Blue survive. and then 2 other random people, I think, that were like the...
I feel like they were in the movies, but I don't remember at all which.
Yeah, I can't remember who the other ones were. But all the main characters survive. And to your point about Carol, I think he's probably running away, but as soon as the boat crashes and now he's on the news, people realize that it's Carol because he was a very prominent figure.
Yeah, he's probably got to deal with some ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife is probably getting out of jail.
Yeah. So ironically, that kind of works out in a fateful way. But yeah, so everything comes together, and it just like drives home this point of connectivity from the judge who's been spying on all these people, and all these people that we have, in a sense, been spying on through the 3 films, in just the way that films work, are all brought together.
And it was surprising too, right? Like there's the moment where they're getting on the ferry, and that's the moment where you realize that the young...
Valentine and the young judge, you're like, oh, this is great. This is like the denouement that you're looking for. That's also where
you find out that the young judge is... Well, that's the moment where I realized that the young judge was not the old judge.
The parallel.
I thought
we were jumping in time.
I thought we were jumping in time.
Yeah,
we were not.
It almost gives you that. And, being Kieślowski, like, he might be throwing that in there, like, in a really subtle way. But, yeah, technically, they are 2 different people.
Yeah, they are definitely 2 different people. But yeah, that was a nice surprise at the end. The fact that they connected it all at the end, right? These ideas of, all 3 of these movies definitely have a big amount of the idea of like fate in them.
Oh yeah.
Like everything that happens to these people feels like it was destined to happen to them, especially because, they're all very slice of lifey. All of the characters, they make decisions, but they're also fairly passive protagonists as far as protagonists go. So it was nice to see it all collide at the end into one big thing. And it was also like a nice finishing moment for like the trilogy as a whole.
Yeah.
Right? At the very end, the old judge who's been watching everything since forever becomes the audience in a sense, who is watching the end of the finale of the trilogy. Yeah. So it was a very good way to wrap up an anthological trilogy.
Without feeling like forced or anything, because it relates to these themes that we've been building up and building up and building up.
When the ferry crashed and there were 7 survivors, I was like, that's a lot. Oh.
Yep.
Oh. And then they started showing them, and I was like, okay. But there were a couple who I wasn't sure of. I'm sure if I went back and actually, read the dialogue, I'd be like, oh, this person. But
and then as long as we're here, we'll talk about the very last frame of Valentine looking sad with her hair wet, and the rescue boat swooshing past her, and we freeze frame on that, which is exactly the same as the giant poster that they put up on the street. And then that recalls to your mind when she's doing the photo shoot at the beginning, and he's like, think of something tragic, like the most tragic thing that you can think of. You got to look really sad. And we're like, oh my God. Again, just pulling everything back together from the start of the movie.
So what makes this an anti-romance, Jonathan?
Yeah, so we have 2 protagonists, a male and a female, that do not fall in love in a romantic sense. So they do have this very strong bond with each other. And then around them, we're watching love fall apart, which is the husband that's cheating on his wife as his neighbor, the first one that the judge is spying on. And then the young judge and his girlfriend, their romance is falling apart. And then even Valentine's romance is falling apart. And so we have these 2 characters, a man and a woman that could typically be some kind of a romantic duo that don't fall in love, but they just learn more about love from one another. And then as relationships fall apart around them, Valentine is being built up to go and salvage one of those at the end.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as, so in Blue, right, the tragedy happens and then we see the post-tragedy, which becomes the anti-tragedy. I feel like this movie is the lead up to a romantic movie, and that makes it the anti-romance and how these people become the perfect people for this romance that's about to happen.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, man. Anti-genres.
Anti-genres. Cool. So let's talk about all three of these movies, which we have been doing, but let's just bring it all home. So again, all three of the themes that are driving these movies are not very obvious on their face. You kind of have to watch it and then take some time to think about them in order to draw out. Because I feel like there's a lot of other themes that are much more obvious. Mm-hmm. So there is obviously a theme of sadness and depression and moving on in Blue. There's a revenge theme in White, and then there's a kind of a moral theme of stalking and how much connectivity you have with other people, which kind of ties in. But, you know, you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. It's not just like, liberty. It's about a revolution, like literally just freeing ourselves, or egalite is not about, you know, prince and a pauper reverse situation kind of thing. So they're not crammed down your throat, but they are presented in very subtle ways. Yeah.
And you get the sense while you're watching them that there is something larger going on, but there's also a very interesting and beautiful story happening in front of you. And the fact that they don't cram it down your throat makes it almost encourages you to think more on your own. Yeah. And you leave the theater, or probably more accurately your couch, stuck with these movies.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is a hard trilogy to binge, because after each one, you're just going to be kind of like head spun, you know, depending on who you are, maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for 5 days. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's a lot to think about in them. They go pretty deep. Yeah, absolutely. And there are themes, like really little things that kind of connect these together. Almost the Cornetto ice cream of the movies. Like we talked about how Edgar Wright actually got his idea of 3 flavors from this movie in a kind of funny way, because that's the guy that he is. I mean, his first movie is called A Fistful of Fingers. So, so there are things like each film ends with a character crying. So we end with Julie crying, and actually several characters. This like really intense montage at the end of Blue. We already talked about Carol crying at the end of White, and then the shot of her crying after the crash in Red. Also, the old person trying to recycle in each of these movies. Did you notice this thread? So I don't know if I would have picked it up. I don't know if you mean thematic recycling, or if you mean like there's literally an old person in the background of each of these movies trying to recycle like a can.
Not even in the background. There's a shot in each of these of an old person trying to put a bottle in this recycling thing, and they can't reach it, and they can't get it all the way in. Does it happen in each one? It happens in each one. The only reason I know that is because I watched the Criterion trailer for each of these movies, and they used that shot in all the trailers. So in the first one, the old lady is trying to recycle, and Julie doesn't even notice her. Only the audience can see her. And so the character is kind of left free to her own devices. I'm going to try and tie these into all of our themes here. In Red, Carol watches the old person try to recycle and just kind of sits there, because this is right after he gets back to, or right after he leaves for Poland. So he has nothing. And so he just kind of watches him kind of like on the same plane, like we both have nothing going for us. And then in Red is the only one where Valentine actually gets up and goes and helps them push the bottle all the way in, obviously in the spirit of brotherhood. So that's a really interesting, just like little thing that you may miss until like a second or third watch. And then also every character each of our protagonists has something from their past that they're holding on to. So the chandelier in Blue, both the 2 franc piece in White that he gets back from his phone call and then just obsessively carries around with him. He like tries to protect it from the thieves after he gets taken in his suitcase. And also that the bust that he steals from the window, yes. And like really creepily
the bust is really weird.
Yeah. And then in Red, not so much Valentine, but the judge has the fountain pen that he used to sign like his first edict. And then the minute he goes to write all of his neighbors that he's been spying on them, his pen breaks. And so he starts using a pencil instead. And also the young judge is given a fountain pen by his girlfriend when he passes his test. So that is another thing that equates those two characters. So again, this is what makes a thematic trilogy. They don't have to be the same story. They can connect. Like the fact that all the characters are in the same place at the end doesn't necessarily make it a trilogy. But I think all of these little things stylistically and thematically are what make these movies cohesive, aside from the fact that they're marketed as a trilogy.
Yeah, right? Like a trilogy just has to be made by some connecting thread. And the standard is for them to be connected narratively, right? Like for a trilogy to be one story broken up into 3 pieces over 3 movies, sometimes from 1 book, sometimes from 3 books, sometimes from 4. Anyway, that's a different discussion. But, you know, you can connect them thematically. We've talked about that a lot. And you can always make up trilogies on your own, randomly connecting 3 movies, and the bar is just, does it make sense?
So you take right? You take the Man with No Name trilogy, which were never even really meant to be a trilogy. They're just Clint Eastwood playing a very similar character in 3 movies.
Because it was all like you know, low budget spaghetti western stuff.
And you can't really connect them logically. Good, Bad, and the Ugly, like timeline doesn't work, and Lee Van Cleef is in 2 movies as 2 completely different characters. But people kind of connect them in their minds because they have enough style and character tissue that connects them.
They could have been twins.
They could have been twins.
What if they were secret twins? They were separated at birth. Hey, it works now. Yeah, and people, obviously, you know, as we just demonstrated, people will bend over backwards to make trilogies happen. But, you know, the significance of a trilogy that is not connected by a story is how well the themes connect together to make it make sense. And this is a trilogy whose themes, multiple themes together to make one larger overarching theme.
I mean, more handsome.
I'm in a very handsomely day.
We are in a visual medium today. So
is this a sign? I bet this is a sign.
Maybe church or something.
I don't know. Anyway, but yes, they come together to form an overarching theme. Themes that become an overarching theme that work so well together that, of course, they make a brilliant trilogy. And of course, they connect so well.
And of course, they were planned that way, especially specifically in this case.
I mean, they were specifically planned to be that. And of course, that makes them work better. Or, you know, the Cornetto trilogy, which we already have an episode on. You can go watch it in our backlog.
Also an anthology, which cannot be logistically connected like this one is, where all the characters are in the same place. But
also, the world gets destroyed multiple times.
That's true. But again, the fact that the character dynamics are very similar or ironically changed, and the Cornetto ice cream and stuff is kind of a quirky little connection. Yeah.
That one's an exploration of genre cinema, and one is an exploration of really deep themes.
Yeah.
And when I say deep, one of the things I mean about it, and it might be frustrating because I'm not explaining, you know, it's deep because of this and you should take away this. But one of the things that makes it deep and so easy to endlessly explore is the fact that there is no definite explanation given for any of it. You're steered very firmly in certain directions, and you're given very firm examples of how people interact with this theme or use this theme in their day-to-day or use it for these definitive moments in their life and how it influences them. But you're not given the answer. You're given all of the juice you need to think about this thing in a deep, meaningful way, and you're steered along that path. But then where you go from there is up to you.
And again, sometimes it's an ironic presentation, right? So it's kind of an antithesis, like a way that we're not supposed to think about equality. We're not supposed to think about it as getting even. But it is a way to approach that theme. We just have to be the ones that sift through the good parts and the bad parts of the theme that's being presented to us.
All right. So what do you think about this Kieślowski quote, Jonathan, that the words liberté, égalité, and fraternité are French words, or they were used in French, because the money to fund the films is French. If the money had been of a different nationality, we would have titled the films differently, or they might have had different cultural connotation, but the films would have been the same. So the scripts were the scripts.
Yeah, the scenarios were essentially the same.
But they were put into these thematic categories around the ideals of the French Revolution because they were funded by a French filmmaker.
I just kind of like the idea of if Germany had sponsored these movies, we would have had black, yellow, and red. And like how ridiculous
that
would
would have
that
been
be?
very different trilogy.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like obviously if you have these scenarios, like they can be the same, but now like watching them as completed, they seem kind of inextricable from the themes. It seems
hard to imagine them otherwise. And I think it's because the way Kieślowski is talking about it in this quote is that he was there before the films existed in their final state, right? So he knows
they were malleable when he was looking at them.
It was still incomplete. It was still shiftable. It was still mercurial when it existed in the form that he's thinking about them in. But once they've gone through that cultural filter of being French, now they've become something. And once they're in that final state, they're in that final state.
Yeah.
Director's cut or not, they're irrevocably connected to the ideals of the French Revolution. It just is what it is now.
Yeah, but I just like thinking about that quote. Like, what else could it have been? It would have been like very, very different. Now, if it was America, it could have been red, white, and blue. Freedom, freedom, freedom.
Freedom. Welcome to America. Here's a hot dog. Have some freedom on us.
Cool. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, but I kind of want a hot dog.
Honestly,
well, speaking of Carol.
That's true.
Let's talk about Carol. What's his middle name?
Probably Carol.
Probably. Either that or it has to be something that's spelled the same forwards and backwards.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Race car. Carol, race car, Carol.
Oh my gosh.
There's probably a better Polish palindrome.
Yeah, probably.
That's a good bit of alliteration, Polish palindrome. I don't know in what situation I would use a Polish palindrome. I ponder. Anyway, so next week is our
last episode of the season, Alex.
Last episode of the season. Yes, I wasn't sure there for a second. Thank you for reminding me.
It is indeed.
But we will be doing a Christmas episode again, but this time, instead of doing just like a lot of movies, we're going to narrow it down to just 3 movies, but they are all very similar in that they are the same story.
Right.
Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, done 3 times over. A Christmas Carol from 1951. Scrooged from 1988, a very different take on Christmas Carol, and then A Christmas Carol from 2009.
The animated take.
This might be the only time that we have 2 movies that have the same exact name.
That is not true at all, Alex.
Is it?
We have done Pride and Prejudice 3 times over.
That's
we have
true.
done King Kong 3 times over. We have done Batman 3 times over.
We've the Batman movies had different
Batman
ones.
The movie,
but Pride and Prejudice was just definitely
Well, and then Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Pride and Prejudice,
but King Kong is all exactly the same.
But King Kong was King Kong. Although the middle one shouldn't even be counted as a movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. So yeah,
but yes, ho ho ho, and bah humbug to you. We are talking about A Christmas Carol 3 times over. We wanted to do 3 of the same movie this time around to really drill into one and see how somebody adapts and a really good one. I mean, like different times.
Honestly, the most classic Christmas story of all time.
Yeah,
that has been done so many times that we're kind of narrowing it down to these 3. And yeah, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how Dickens translates into the 21st century.
Yeah. And stay tuned next week. We will have some announcements for you guys about the upcoming year and some stuff for us to work on and for you to at least hopefully enjoy.
I just realized I have a little Vertigo halo right here. I feel like I'm in a Renaissance painting. Sorry. Continue.
That's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at @JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garinger.
And I'm the Blue Jay, being forced into doing No Shave November. And you can find me on Twitter at the Blue Jay 1994.
And to find links to things that we talked about today, you can view them on the blog at thefilmlings.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right, see ya.
Through the film, Julie befriends a prostitute living downstairs, tries to avoid a romantically charged. I mean, I guess that works too. Ooh. Through the film, Julie. Damn it. Through the film, Julie befriends a. Almost said a romantically attached prostitute. Now it's all coming together. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You're not like saying sex. Yeah. So I think consummated is all right. It's all right. It's all right. We're mature audiences here. In the second film of the trilogy, Polish France, whom he meets while sleeping in his suitcase. In his suitcase? Is it that big?
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Oh my God. Are you sure this isn't a comedy? Carol is left penniless with only his large snootcase. Snootcase. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jonathan. After she accidentally hits his dog with her car.
Yeah, you should probably read this before.
God, that's insane. After she accidentally hits his dog with a car. Sorry, there's more to that sentence. Valentine finds that he spends most of his time using a frequency scanner to eavesdrop on the phone calls of his neighbors. What the hell? This is insane. I freaking love this. It's a weird sequel to Rear Window.